Hello, and welcome to YouMatter. Thank you so much for joining us today. I have a wonderful guest. Before we get to our guest, though, I would just like to remind everybody of what the mission of the movement YouMatter is about. YouMatter is a place for victims and their families and their loved ones to find information in a non-judgmental way so that victims and their families can move to a place of peace and safety. And today I'm thrilled to have my first organization here from the Women's Rights Information Center in Englewood, New Jersey. We have a very lovely, very qualified individual with us, and that is Vidalia Acevedo. And before Vidalia gets into her skill set and what she does at the Women's Information Center, I want to really give a shout out to her and tell you about her past and her experience. So in 1997, Vidalia started at the Save Our Sisters, the Shelter Our Sisters, sorry, SOS, that is currently known as the Center for Hope and Safety. And that was in 1997. And you started as an administrative assistant to the executive director. And in 1999, you accepted a position at SOS as a bilingual counselor, responsible for receiving and assessing calls from victims in crisis and providing counseling, case management, but you were also responsible for providing community outreach services. They included educating multicultural immigrant communities of victims of domestic violence and unavailable options of self-petitioning under the Victims Against Women's Act, as well as working collaboratively with the immigration rights groups to assist these victims and their families, hundreds of them, to find themselves, get themselves out of the cycle of violence and transition to a violence-free life, and ensure that these families and needs and their services in the community were made aware and received the available resources. And in 2013, based on the increased need to provide multicultural outreach services to victims of domestic violence, SOS obtained a one-year grant from the Women United in Philanthropy to implement a multicultural outreach program with the mission of addressing the needs of victims of domestic violence from various cultural communities. Now, today, in 2020, you are with the Women's Rights Information Center as a victim advocate dedicated to providing advocacy to survivors of crime and to help stabilize their lives after victimization and trauma. To that end, Ms. Acevedo provides crisis intervention, safety planning, counseling, advocacy, referrals, case management to the victim population. Wow. Thank goodness for people like you.
Oh, thank you.
And welcome, Vidalia. Welcome to YouMatter.
Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure being here and talking about this very important topic. It's very close to my heart. I'm very passionate about it. And I've been working with victims for 22 years. And it's very rewarding, but it's also very difficult when working with victims, because for so many women, they are so trapped in that cycle of violence. And in order to untangle everything, there needs to be so much patience. I think a lot of times, many of our victims and survivors feel so judged because sometimes their, communities or even agencies, other agencies ask, why is this woman still in this relationship, or why hasn't she left? And it's so important to understand the importance of how difficult the choice to leave or to stay is in a relationship. It depends on the type of victimization. It depends on what the circumstances are for that victim. And it's very important, especially culturally, to understand why some of the women stay in the relationship, and it may take them maybe 10, 12 years before they're able to leave an abusive relationship. So it's important that women don't feel judged. So when I receive calls from clients or from survivors or victims, um, you know, I am very non-judgmental. Wherever they are, that's where I'm going to meet them. Wherever they are. It's so important because I want to gain the trust of that one person who I might have been the very first person that she spoke to. And she needs to know that I am listening actively and that I'm letting her speak and I'm not interfering in what she has been holding on to for so long. So giving that type of support is extremely, extremely, extremely important.
And you are, of course, bilingual, correct? Or maybe
Uh,
trilingual?
well, no, I'm bilingual. I am Spanish speaking. I have a little accent myself. I come from the South Bronx. So that's that little accent. But it doesn't really. I'll give you an example. I'm working with a woman today that speaks no English whatsoever. And thank God for Google Translate, because this is how we communicate. I write in English and translate it into her dialect, and she does the same thing. And we've been working together now for close to a year.
And is she Spanish speaking? Or
No, she's actually Turkish.
okay, because when you said dialect, I know sometimes.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Oh no, that's fine. I was just curious because one time I was someplace and there was a group of women from Guatemala, and they
Ah,
were from an area in Guatemala that had a sort of the indigenous language. And there was another woman from
yes,
Guatemala, and she said, I'm not that from that area, so I don't speak that dialect. So
right.
I thought that was fascinating. I really did.
It is fascinating. In fact, I never even knew that. Now
Yeah.
that you bring that up, because I did have a client that she was Latina, but she spoke a very specific dialect.
Mhm.
And it was so specific that I had to search for someone that spoke that particular dialect. I did find someone, but it is very interesting, the different dynamics in that.
Absolutely. And of course, this is key to understanding and being able to speak to them in their dialect or in their language for
Right.
them to get the resources and save their lives, really.
Absolutely. Safety planning is huge when dealing with victims of domestic violence. Not everybody that calls, not everybody that's in an abusive relationship is immediately looking for shelter. Shelter is always the last resource for a woman.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's first looking to understand what her rights are with the legal aspect of her situation, custody about her children. Um, how is she going to sustain herself if she does leave this abusive relationship? Maybe her husband is the caregiver while she works. If she leaves that relationship, how is she going to get childcare? There's so many different layers that go into making the decision of whether or not you're going to stay in a relationship. And they're complicated lives,
Yes.
and the complications are huge. And just helping them put those factors into some kind of logic. Maybe the safety plan is, you know, helping her understand when she's gonna be abused. What does it feel like? Where does she know when it's gonna escalate? How does she protect herself? What are some of the things she can do? Right?
Yes.
Because she's not ready to leave at
Right.
this point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, not at all. I would imagine that I know from my own experience, it was just about, it was a long time ago, but it was just about, I didn't even know there were services like the Women's Rights
Right.
Information Center.
Yes.
And that's key, and that's the purpose here today, is to really let
Yes.
the audience know that there are so many services out there. So I know there's so much that the Women's Information Rights Center does, but can you explain and expand a little bit about the services that are offered?
Absolutely. So, you know, the Women's Rights Information Center was founded by Phoebe. I'm sorry, I can't remember her.
It'll
But
come
give
to
me
you.
a second.
It's okay.
Seaham, I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
And she founded this little white building in Englewood, New Jersey, in 1973. And it started out with just a small circle of women who started to talk about the platform of how they're going to be able to survive and be able to, have meaningful jobs, jobs that are going to support them, make them self-sufficient, help them with their families. And this is how this the women's rights information started. And of course, the women's rights information has, grown by leaps and bounds. And some of the the services that we offer are uh, displaced homemaker services, which is, maybe someone has been out of work for quite some time, and they had a job before they went into taking care of their children and doing all of that, which is work too. We
Sure.
can't minimize that, but it helps. So that program helps them get back into the workforce. It explores their goals, their options, like what it is they want to continue learning or how they want to grow. What are their aspirations? So all of these things are explored in the Department of the Displaced Homemakers. We also have Microsoft Office, which offers computer classes, which is key right now because everything is virtual.
Yes.
So for many of the women that come to our agency, this is very appealing to them because they're able to navigate and to learn how to do, the Microsoft Word, and how to just learn how to navigate through that whole computer system. And it's like an eye opener for them. It also makes them more marketable in terms of, being able to be in a virtual world, which is where we are right now.
Oh, yes, yes, absolutely. I think those types of services, you have sort of a virtual office assistant. That's a huge business, actually.
Yeah.
So, and
Um,
only growing those types of services.
yes. And we also offer ESL classes um, for those that, are learning English, which is very important because if you don't have the English language, it's going to be very difficult for you to find a meaningful job. And those classes are key. Those classes are always full
Yes.
because there's so many people that are looking for that. Language is very important. So ESL classes for us are extremely important, as all the programs are. We have career counseling, which helps women if they want to pursue going back to school. What does that look like for them? Where is it that their interests lay? We have a wonderful person. Her name is Donna Dalton, who has done.
Donna.
Oh my goodness, she is just phenomenal.
Yes.
And she helps the women she motivates them in a way where they really are engaged in what she's talking about and how she's offering these programs that are being offered by Bergen Community. I mean, these are things that our clients would have never thought they would have been able to obtain some training or even continue in some kind of educational venue. And it's exciting. It's exciting because it gives them hope and it gives them opportunity to know that at the end of the day, they're going to walk away with being self-sufficient, taking care of their family, being able to take care of themselves, and not feel like they're always in this cycle of poverty and this cycle of having to catch up with, how am I going to pay my bills, a minimum wage job. They want more than that. They want to be able to be motivated, to be able to be lifted and be able to go forward in their education. And that is so important. It doesn't matter if they start at ESL and work their way up to college. they're starting somewhere, and our agency is giving them that opportunity to excel and use what that passion that they've always had and never had anybody help them through that. And the Women's Rights Information Center helps them do that. And the beautiful thing about that is that we stick with them until they are completely immersed in it. We help them through that whole process. So, and for victims of domestic violence, I believe it's so important because the two connect. It's very important because when you're a victim, you're financially deprived.
Yes.
Your abuser is always reminding you, you're nobody, you will be no one, you can't have any money, you can't do any of these things. So when a victim comes into our agency, and after we've gotten through all of the issues of legal, whatever is going on for her, and we talk about, listen, these are the programs that we can offer you. It's almost like a veil has lifted because it's giving them that opportunity and that hope and the knowledge that, hey, I can do something. I'm not stupid.
Right.
I'm not useless. I'm
Right.
not worthless. So we're giving them that encouragement through all of these programs, educational programs that we offer in the agency.
Financial
And
security.
hmm,
Financial security is so being able to understand. I mean, you may have the skills, but helping them to understand they have the skills. And that's what you really do, because what you're saying is these women have the skills.
right.
They just have been so beaten down verbally, physically, in
Yes.
many ways, that they don't believe they do. And that's so empowering to them.
It's extremely empowering because it helps them to remember that who they were before they entered into this relationship and that they can have that again and even better because they have a story.
They have a story.
And, they're going to take that story and that's going to be part of who they are, but it's also going to be part of how they grow.
Yes.
So it's so important. And the Women's Rights Information Center, that tiny little building with 15 counselors and workers who are so passionate because we want to see every single person that comes in through those doors. And now, of course, it's Zoom, but to continue to know that we're there, that we're going to continue to encourage, empower, and give them the hope that they are, so much wanting and needing, especially during these COVID times.
Mhm.
We're all isolated, and it's very difficult. Whether you're in a situation where you're a victim of domestic violence, or you're just you have so much going on with your children and homeschooling and all of this, just to have a place that you can go to and just be able to say, wow, these are all the things that they can offer in terms of education. We have support groups that help survivors connect with one another, talk about what they're going through, and just being able to have that group weekly connects them, And when women come onto our Zoom for educational purposes, they're also being connected. They're connected to the instructor and to the rest of the class. So all this is very important to help, women in general to continue to grow and to become self-sufficient.
It must be so wonderful for them to know there's a community out there. I'm not the only one. I would imagine those types of groups are just so important. And Vidalia, can you talk a little bit, since you're bilingual,
Yep.
about the community that's here that might be undocumented and they're really afraid? They really are afraid.
Yes, undocumented. It's very difficult because they're very afraid. In order for someone who's undocumented to reach out to anyone, you have to be very trusted in the community, very trusted. And I find that working with victims who are undocumented, it's very difficult because before they come to you, they don't, like you said earlier, you didn't know that there were any services when you were going through your through your own issues and trauma. You know, many of our clients, not only don't they know what's available, they're afraid because they think they're going to be deported.
That's right.
For many of our victims, they don't report any kind of abuse. It could be domestic violence, it could be a sexual assault, it could be a robbery. They're afraid to report because they believe that they're going to be deported. And when we're able to talk to the community and let them know that they can report that they're not going to be deported and the reasons why, you know, they feel a little more at ease because, you know, when I talk to them about the courts in general, if you report an incident to the police, you're reporting an incident or a crime. They're going to look at it as a crime. They're not looking at it that you're undocumented and it's not a court of deportation. So explaining the two differences is very important for immigrants to know, that they can come and they can, you know, get the help that they need. But even with all of that, they're still very doubtful.
I cannot
So that,
understand.
yeah. So that's why it's really important.
Yes, and if they had children that were born here, they probably fear that they'll be deported and their children will be left behind, and who will be caring for them. So as a mother,
Absolutely.
we know
Absolutely. That's a huge issue. I mean, it's always been an issue, but I think now because it's in the forefront and it's, you know, it's advertised and, you know, the immigrant community is very much um, locked into all the Spanish news and what's happening. So when they hear all these reports, of course, the fear is huge. And that's why it's, you know, very important for our agency when we do have the women that come in that are looking for services or who are afraid. And maybe that, you know, the best way to reach our community of immigrants is by word of mouth. Because if one person comes in and says, oh, I spoke to this counselor and she was great. She gave me so much information. I trust this, that. And that's why we're so successful in helping that community of immigrants, men and women.
yes, right.
Yeah.
And women. And speaking, I'm so glad you brought that up because I know from my experience of working with the Women's Rights Information Center that you really don't turn anyone away. If you don't provide a service, you help find a service. So that could be for a man, maybe a trans individual.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that, Vidalia?
Absolutely. We don't turn anyone away. We help anyone who is seeking our services, whether it's a man, anybody from the LBGQ community. We are an open door and we will help them where, like I said earlier, wherever they are. If the gentleman comes in, he's welcome to join our orientation. We have orientation that describes every single program that we offer. And the orientation talks about what's being offered in our programs, whether that's Microsoft, job readiness, we have resume writing, we have wonderful women who will sit down with any participant who comes in to help them structure and update their resumes so that they can become more marketable, which is so important. And that's across the board. So when they come in and they hear all the services that we have, the orientation is like a light bulb goes off for them because they're like, oh, I know exactly where I want to be or where I want to go, or I want to join this program or the other program. So it's really, you know, it's really important. We just don't turn anybody away. We try to find, if you're looking for a job and right now you really have to sustain your family.
Yes.
We're going to help you find that. We're going to help you find that job. We're going to, you know, work very hard to get you to that point.
So important to know that you do help all communities. That's extremely important. And so, you know, also because it is a Black History Month, I think it's really important to talk about the statistics of domestic violence. And, you know, it's really very chilling when we hear statistics that 50% of the women that die in this country die at the hands of their intimate partner.
Yes,
And really the larger number, a very large number of that percentage is women of color.
yes.
I was just wondering if, if the Women's Rights Information Center ever explores that or sort of tries to really talk about that and share that information with the community.
Absolutely. We do share that with a lot of our congregations in the community, um, the churches. And, it's true. The African American community, especially the women, it's difficult to reach that population, but we do, because there's a lot of shame in for any culture
Mhm.
to talk about domestic violence or anything that has to do with abuse. And especially for a lot of women, when it is part of the religion or the churches,
Sure.
it's very difficult to come out of that situation, because for the most part you're talking to your pastor or you're talking to an elder in the church, and so they try to intervene in those types of in that type of situation. But we are very much aware of that situation, and we stay very much close and in touch with with our African American community. um so we they're welcome to all our programs. We outreach to the churches and to the communities to ensure to let them know that we're there for them, and you know they're no different than any of the other women that we are dealing with. It's
So,
all inclusive.
right. So if there's a woman or a family member or someone who knows someone who's in a domestic violence situation, what's the first step that you recommend they take?
So, again, it depends on where the victim is or the survivor,
Mhm.
right? So if a victim calls and she's in a process and she doesn't know what she wants to do, we explore that. We give them the resources. You have the opportunity to go to shelter. If that's not an option for you, you can file for a restraining order, temporary restraining order. What does the restraining order do? What does it look like?
Right. Sorry about that. I got a
That's
text
okay.
message.
um,
Well, yes.
so the restraining order, that's another option that a client can take. Not everybody wants to file for restraining orders because they don't want to have to go through the whole court system. They think that maybe they can settle it in a different way, but it's an option that gives them the opportunity to stay in their home with their children temporarily. They will have the custody of their children, and the abuser cannot violate that order until the final hearing. On the final hearing, then it's determined whether or not she's going to receive a final restraining order, and that determination is made by the judge.
That's wonderful. Okay, there we go. Sorry about
You
that.
got it?
Yes, I just had to take care of that. That's
Okay.
wonderful because knowing that you are legal rights and there are systems in places to protect you, because it is terrifying. There's such a fear of retaliation um,
Absolutely.
with people that are going through domestic violence, and that's what just freezes them. And it's not even like when you're so, as you know, when you're traumatized, you're not making a decision. You're just completely reacting. You're not saying,
Right.
well, I think I'll stay because I'm scared. It's just, you're like, I'm frozen. I can't do anything. I'm terrified.
That's right. And
Right.
even after you get the information, you're still terrified
You're still
because
terrified.
you still have to make that very difficult and complex decision,
And
right?
you're terrified after you leave. You're still terrified.
Absolutely.
You're terrified for years after you leave. And I think that's
Okay.
important for victims to know, or if anyone's listening to this, that and I'm sure they probably know that the minute you go out, it doesn't mean your fear goes away. But
Right.
it's really fear of retaliation. And even if there is maybe an abuser that is put in jail, there's still a fear. There's still a fear of what will happen in the future. So yes, it does take time. And what do they say? Time is the healer. And it just, it just,
Time is the healer, and it's true, Tara. Even after you leave a relationship, you successfully left, but you have to co-parent maybe with that abuser. So then you continue to have to go through it's a whole different type of system that you have to kind of figure out how you're going to survive it,
right.
So it doesn't end, like you said, once you leave. But women figure out how to overcome that. And, while it's difficult, it's never impossible.
It's never impossible.
The resilience that our women have is beyond. That resilience is what keeps them surviving and going in spite of all the challenges that they've had as victims. So it's whoever's listening. Yes, leaving is difficult. It's scary, but at the same time, it's very liberating. And as time goes on, like you said, that time heals a lot of the difficulties you're going through. They don't go away. They're always there, but they're a part of you, but you learn how to manage them. And that's what's important.
Yes, I think that's so true that it's possible for everyone to leave. And so the places like the Women's Rights Information Center provides services for them for housing, legal services. Also, you and
Absolutely.
I had one time had a conversation about pets. And a lot of times people are afraid to leave because maybe the abuser is not just abusing them, they might be abusing the children, but they might be abusing pets. And there's
Yes,
also services out there that will take a pet while you may
absolutely.
be in a rehousing situation.
When I worked at the Center for Hope and Safety, we worked with it was a program that was called Shelter Our Pets.
Mhm.
And during the time those women that decided to go for shelter, if they knew that their pets would be safe, it would be a lot easier for them to leave because you love your pets. They're part of your family. They're part of who you are. And, you don't want to leave your pet behind because that pet would suffer also at the hands of the abuser. So Shelter Our Pets was so instrumental in helping us get victims to leave because they would adopt a pet until the victim or the survivor got back on her feet, got an apartment, went into transitional housing, whatever her situation might have been, and then she would be able to bring her pet with her.
Yes,
And that's everything for a pet owner that's going through a domestic violence situation. And the beautiful thing about Shelter Our Pets is that the children um, would be able to visit the pets at the adoptive parent's home. So the family stayed very well connected with the pets. So yes, that's very important for listeners to know if that's a factor um, for making a decision whether to go into a shelter or if you had to leave, that there are agencies that help you with getting safety for your pets.
Oh, yes. And so traumatizing for the child to move out of their home, and then they're worried about their pet, and then certainly the pet itself is wondering, where's my family? But the fact that that's amazing that they shelter our pets, that they will
Yes.
allow the families to visit, that's so wonderful. I'm so happy that you shared that because of these types of services, again, are what listeners need to know, and it's something that's just so near and dear to my heart. Now,
And I just wanted to mention too,
mhm,
Tamara, that our agency, the Women's Rights Information Center, also has a shared housing program.
mm,
That's a great program. Susan Bendis is the program director for that particular program, and it's been in existence for as long as the agency has been around. And what it does, it helps women who are looking for a shared housing to share a home with someone else. She's the one that makes the match for women that are, or men. It doesn't have to be women, it can be men as well, who are looking to go into that type of housing situation.
Because it's so difficult to live on your own. It's so expensive. A lot of people, I mean, that's sort of a
Absolutely.
national, maybe even international conversation of
Hmm.
rising cost of housing. And especially in an area like Bergen County, New Jersey, it's very expensive. Or
It's
South
extremely
New Jersey. Yes.
housing is yeah, housing is a challenge right now for many for many people,
Yes.
but in particular for you know victims of domestic violence and uh, just in general, really. It's
So that's
housing, like you said, it's very expensive. There's also a program that is through the program through the Women's Rights Information Center that helps seniors who
hmm,
have been affected by, who have been affected through COVID, who helps them with um, financial means in terms of if they need a PSE&G bill paid, if they have need their if they live in a home and they have to pay for the oil, things like that, food, all those kind of things. So that program helps the seniors. You have to be 65 years and older, but it's a great program for the seniors because, we have to remember our seniors. They also are suffering tremendously during this time.
yes.
Yeah,
They certainly are, and they are so vulnerable as well.
absolutely.
So that's
Hmm.
amazing. So that those services too. I'm so glad we're sharing this information for the
Yes.
listeners. This is so important. Now, what about the future needs of your clients when you think of maybe programs you'd like to see expanded or funding? Can you talk a little bit about that? Just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that, Tara?
Sure, absolutely. The future needs
Mhm.
of your clients that might be, and meaning what other programs would you like to see expanded for victims of domestic violence and their families?
One of the things that, of course, the Women's Rights Information Center is always looking for grants and things to continue to grow the agency. I think that for victims of domestic violence, one of the biggest and most complicated is the legal um, portion of it, right? Even though we have a great program, we have a legal program that gives assistance to clients who are seeking information. They do a wonderful job. Our attorneys are giving a legal consultation, but many of our clients are seeking help with actually things like custody, um, divorces, those big ticketed items that um, what happens for many of our clients, they can't keep up with the cost, and the abusers do have attorneys that they hire, and our clients try to keep up with that, but it's just too overwhelming. It could run into thousands of 20, maybe $30,000,
Absolutely.
and our clients find themselves often doing pro se. So they start with an attorney, but then they're not able to afford the cost. Then they have to do the case on their own. And that becomes very complicated. It is complicated
Oh
for
yeah.
women to try to understand that and be they're emotionally attached to what's happening, and they also have to defend themselves at the same time when
Yes.
it comes to custody of their children. So it's extremely difficult. So the legal component to that, I think for me, it's something that I would love to see grow, and I think we are working on that um, for our agency and for victims.
Yes, I've also heard victims say that it's terrifying to be in the same courtroom with their abuser. So if they do end up going to court, then that's another reason why what a victim may fear. Oh no, am I going to have to face my abuser in court? It's just
Right.
so terrifying to even see them very often for victims. So yeah, so this is good to hear that there's awareness coming to that area. And then also there are probably lawyers that will take certain cases pro bono, correct? Or
Oh, absolutely. So there are like Legal Services of New Jersey.
Mhm.
They do take, so if somebody's going to file for a restraining order or they need help with that, they usually take those cases. And at times they do take custody cases if it's not a complicated custody case. ADV also does a great job at helping women with restraining orders and to that, mostly pro bono attorneys. But again, when the cases are, divorces or custody, that can go on for 2 or 3 years.
yeah,
So it does become very complicated.
yes, the lawyers are
And
the ones that end up making the money, and
yeah, right,
right.
exactly.
And
Um,
what was that agency? AD something you said?
Alternatives to domestic violence.
Alternatives to domestic violence. And just so the listeners know, all of these resources will be listed below in the description so that you'll
Yes.
be easily found. Yes.
There's also there's a great program. It's called Victims of Crime Compensation, and it's available to victims who have um, had any kind of crime committed against them.
Mm.
And this program it's a government program. It's a state-run program through the Attorney General's office, and it helps victims of crime if they want to relocate, if they need assistance with counseling. It also helps them with legal fees
Mhm.
if it's connected to the crime that has been committed against them.
Mm.
Yeah, so
Wonderful.
it's also it's a good resource. There are some limitations, there has to be a crime committed against you, and domestic violence is a crime, so that would entitle a victim to tap into that resource as
That's
well.
wonderful. And just
Yes,
so the listeners know, if there's someone listening and they're finding these resources are hard to weed through, you can always call the Women's
abs-
Rights Information Center, and they will help you go through all of these resources one by one with a counselor, just like our friend here, Vidalia. That's
you
wonderful.
will probably be talking to me if you call the Women's Rights Information Center, um, if you're a victim or a survivor.
Mhm.
And yes, we can give you all the information and continue to work with you and get you the help that you need.
Well, if there is anyone listening, I really hope that today meeting Vidalia has eased some anxiety. Whether you're the victim themselves, a family member, or a loved one, to know that there are services out there. And I know it's been a long day for you. And is there just any last piece of information or encouragement that you'd like to share today with anyone that might be listening before I let you go on with your night?
Yeah, well, I just want to say thank you so much for just letting our agency, the Women's Rights Information Center, be a part of YouMatter, because it's so important for anyone that's listening, especially if you're a victim of domestic violence, to know that you're not alone, that you can call our agency and we will direct you, we will guide you, we will hold your hand to get you the services that you need. You never have to feel like you're alone. And whether you're ready to leave or you just need someone to speak with and someone that's going to be able to just validate what you're feeling, please just know that we're here for you. And that's so important for anyone to hear. Even if you're not a victim and you want to call the Women's Rights Information Center, we're there to listen. Our phones are always available. Someone will always pick up the phone
And
and speak with you.
you also accept volunteers, correct?
We absolutely we accept volunteers. I mean, now with COVID, we're still, trying to figure that out, but we do take volunteers. Our volunteers are so important. We
Mm,
couldn't do the work we do without our volunteers,
sure.
because they're there to help us answer phones, um, give a kind word to a victim that comes in or to a client that comes in, direct them. So volunteers are super important for us.
That's terrific for the audience to know, because when things start to reopen again, I'm sure you will need some volunteers. So if there's anyone listening, you can
Absolutely.
go to the website, which again will be in the description. And
Yes.
Vidalia, I want to thank you so much. You said so many valuable things today.
Oh, I'm so glad.
Just to let people know they're not alone, like you said. Being alone
Yes.
is, I remember how alone I felt. And
Yes.
that was sometimes as bad as the abuse.
Yes. And I can't tell you how many times after I speak with a victim that calls me and she says to me, "Thank you so much." They say, "I feel so much better. I feel I feel like a weight has been lifted from my shoulders." And that person, even though they haven't made a decision to stay or to leave, they know where they have to call and who they can talk to help them get through that process. And that's the key. Knowing that you're not alone. It's so important.
Knowing that you have rights and that you have options and you have
Absolutely. Yes.
so empowering. Well, Vidalia, thank you so much for your time
Yes.
today. Again,
Thank you, Tana.
I appreciate it. The Women's Rights Information Center in Englewood, New Jersey. The information will be below for all the agencies. You and I will chat about that. And
Yes.
I'll put the links in there. And I want to thank the audience for listening today. And I do want to say, if there was anyone listening that has a story they want to tell, this will be posted on YouTube and also on Instagram. So please private message me if you have a story you want to share to help someone else. And Vidalia, I'm sure there's so many
Absolutely.
listening today that you have helped. And I
I
just
hope
like to
so.
end with saying, you matter. Thank you for
That's
joining
right.
us. Thank you.
Thank you.